Mira Business FM.
It's the morning drive at Mira Business FM with me, Tim Elliott, and it's the business of cinema next. The latest chapter in the Avatar franchise hit UAE theatres. Global release, I believe, yesterday, right in the heart of the holiday season, which is a critical window for box office performance. It's the follow-up to two of the top three highest grossing films of all time. Now, Fire and Ash, as it's subtitled, is expected to be the biggest movie of the year, and like its predecessors, could also pass $2 billion at the box office. It's highly likely that it will as well. Now, we're going to explore what this release says about the ongoing recovery of theatrical cinema, if indeed that is a thing, the economics of holiday season openings, evolving audience behaviour, and whether blockbuster events like Avatar are now the key to cinema's survival in a streaming era market. Dr David Tully is head of media at Middlesex University Dubai. He's fast becoming our resident kind of film buff expert as well, I'm glad to say. So he's going to join us to break it all down from a media and business perspective. Good morning, David. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. It's lovely to be back. I wish I was in the studio with you, and I'm very impressed you're there. Can you hear me okay, by the way?
I can hear
I had the
you.
window open. I'm on the 18th floor, and the winds were howling around, so I put on the AC, but if it's too loud, I turn that off too. It just get very steamy.
Well, I don't want you to sit and steam in the house. You know, the rain is causing havoc today. It's kind of stealing Avatar's thunder, if you'll excuse the pun this morning. But
I'll excuse it. A lot of elements going on. Yeah. What is it called? Fire and Ash is the title.
Fire and Ash, yes.
And yes, it is stealing its thunder. It kept me locked in here. As I said, I would rather be with you. But I believe your producer has seen the film already.
Michael has. He's on the way. Faraj, who is behind the decks here at the desk this morning, has seen it as well. We have two very different opinions on.
So even the raging elements could not keep them away from the film. That's a testament.
We commit, David. We do. We commit to the cause. Michael loved it. Faraj, probably fair to say, let me just ask him, less impressed? Slightly, yeah, he's nodding vigorously. Look, let's get to the film in a minute, but I have kind of a general question I wanted to ask you to start with, David. How would you describe, first of all, the current state of the global movie theatre business this year? Do you think we're seeing a genuine recovery, or is it still a bumpy ride?
Oh, it's still a bumpy ride. I don't see any real signs of recovery. Remember when we were talking a few weeks ago and I mentioned Superman as an example, that they expected that to easily crack $1 billion. I think it made about half of that. And yet they're desperately rushing a sequel into production, even though the world showed its apathy towards the whole thing, because they don't know what else to do. So in that way, it's dire, but I think you're absolutely right. I think this film is going to be enormous, and it cuts to the heart of what the industry is looking for. Remember, you had me on a few weeks, very kindly had me on a few weeks ago. We were talking about event movies, and can event movies save the business? They don't have anything but event movies to save the business, but not every event movie. We talked about what is an event movie in the first place, and that's a tricky one that I'm not sure there is a definitive answer. We looked at several possible answers. But I think Avatar is going to be enormously successful, and the other two are enormously successful, but they're not showing a roadmap to recovery for the industry, in my opinion, because they're very unique films. James Cameron he's sort of along with Spielberg, he's one of the big names in crafting blockbusters over the past 30 to 40 years. And yet, when you look closely at his output, his career, he really stands alone. He does not follow trends, nor does he create trends that other people follow. His work is very unique. And I was reading an interesting article the other day about Avatar. This is before it came out, and not reviewing the new film because it hadn't come out, but talking about the Avatar franchise is these films that are enormously successful, but absolutely nobody talks about them. You know, with Marvel, you've got characters and story and intricate, interconnected plot lines that people love. With Star Wars, you had characters that people used to love. Nobody could name a character from Avatar. nobody can name a plot line really from Avatar.
You're
As I
right.
said last time I was on, it's Pocahontas. It's Dances with Wolves. You know, it's a story that's been told many times, but that's the key. It's
Yeah.
not the plot, it's how the plot is told. And remember when I was on a few weeks ago and I was saying, well, every story is about, I said, it's a story, it's Christmas stories are about redemption, renewal. And you said quite rightly, isn't every story? At its core, yes. There are certain themes, there are certain plots that are told and retold again and again that audiences respond to. And so it's not about a new plot.
Mm.
There's nothing new in Avatar. It's how the story, it's how the themes and the plots are told. And that's what Cameron does so in such a unique fashion. And so when you asked me to be on, I was thinking and asked me to think about what is it what about James Cameron? Why are his films getting the response they have? And I had no answer really. I was as baffled as anybody else. Again, that article, why are Avatar films so popular and yet nobody talks about them? And after reading the entire article, the writer sort of threw up their hands and I don't know. And neither did anybody else they talked to. But I think yesterday there was this fascinating profile of James Cameron in the Hollywood Reporter,
Yeah.
and he said in it, apparently he's a very grumpy guy. He said at one point, I hate profiles, but he consented to be interviewed for the profile.
That's
But
right.
when you read this profile, you got a sense of his whole career and what he does outside of making movies too. And I think for me, that, you know, a light bulb went off. That's the key. He's an explorer. And that's his passion outside of making films. That he's got the submersible down at the Titanic. He goes exploring in the rain, in the jungles, in the rainforest, investigating some cultures that live out there. Is fascinated with exploring the world,
Y-
not exploring space so much, but exploring the world. And so he comes at his stories as an explorer and with a sense of wonder about the world. And I think that that's what he conveys in his films
Do you know,
again and again.
that's such an important word, actually. And there was a piece I read, the Hollywood Reporter piece last night, actually, and there was one particular quote that stands out, and it kind of backs up everything you've just said there. The things that scare you the most are exactly the things you should be doing. It's kind of a declaration that he made to the writer of the piece. Nobody should be operating artistically from a comfort zone. I thought that was really telling. I want to talk in some detail about James Cameron in the second part of this hour, if you like, because I think there are a number of themes that emerge from his films. My favourite film of his is The Abyss, which is really kind of the military-industrial complex with aliens underwater. Doesn't sound like a great premise, but it was a great movie. It's a late
Great
80s
movie.
movie. But we were kind of rather unkindly referring to Avatar as Dancing with Smurfs earlier on today, jokingly. But
And yet not inaccurately.
well, it kind of isn't. But the thing about it, and you made the point really well there. It's very hard to pin down what it is and what's so great about it. It's a spectacle, and it is a huge movie. But quite why is a little bit beyond me. I'm with you. When it comes to the new movie, Fire and Ash. Releasing yesterday, of course, right in the middle of this, kind of festive holiday New Year window. What does this tell us, the release point tell us about how studios are timing and positioning these as, I suppose, premium events? The idea is maximum financial impact, I guess.
Well, it's still an old-fashioned business that is still desperately racing to keep up with the vast, sweeping technological changes that are changing our daily life in every way, every day, not just going to the movies, but for many, many years, at least this entire what I call the Blockbuster era that goes back to the late 70s when it really started cementing
Mm,
with Jaws and Star Wars, and really then became entrenched in the 80s and 90s. There were two big release windows: the summer, starting around Memorial Day in the U.S., they're kicking off the summer season, and Christmas,
yeah,
which in the U.S. again would kick off with Thanksgiving and go through up to the New Year. Those are and why? Because kids weren't in school, and
yeah.
it's really that simple. They had the disposable income and were inclined to see films, so they geared films towards families, towards kids, and the spectacle event films, of course, ticked that box very well. Not just the more uh, very young kid friendly films like Disney, the cartoons.
Sure.
So I don't know if that's answering your question, but it's still they're putting out a film like Avatar at Christmas because of old habits more than anything. I don't think that as many families now get up and bother to leave the house. They've all got widescreen TVs in the family room. They don't need the hassle of parking and overpriced refreshments and other people talking loudly behind them and tall people sitting in front of them. All the things we can't stand about going to the movies that incentivize people to stay home. But again, these are family events. These are shared communal rituals that unfortunately are becoming less and less of a shared communal ritual.
Well, that is a shame. I mean, I would sort of put forward. Let me contend something for a second. I kind of think Avatar and the series that we now have, it's kind of more than a blockbuster. It's effectively almost a business strategy. I mean, this is a machine driving mass theatrical attendance in an industry that's is struggling to get back to where it was. Is that a reasonable assessment? Do you think?
Oh, it's reasonable from what I referred to last time as the bean counters. And show business is always the entertainment industry is always difficult because you got the creatives and the business people, and they're always at odds, and they always need each other. I think Cameron is as successful as he is because he straddles that divide.
Mm.
And this was, I think, in that Hollywood Reporter that they I'm not sure. No, I think it probably is intentional. They were saying that he loves solving challenges from an engineering perspective, technical
Yes.
challenges.
Yeah.
And of course, all of his films have been one part about them, which we haven't touched on, is the technological achievements. So we could talk about that later. But I think he always, with the point that the profile said, and which is worth pointing out here, he always solves these technical engineering challenges in the service of a story that will connect with the largest possible audience. He wants to connect with the largest possible audience. So for the industry is nothing but a business venture. I don't think for Cameron it is. It wouldn't connect with audiences if it was purely a business venture. He believes in these films. He wants to make them. There's an artistic passion there.
Well, I agree with that. I was thinking about this last night as well. If you look at his movies from a thematic perspective and the kinds of things that he deals with, the kind of things that he puts across, you can imagine the pitch, I think, to studio executives to gain the funding necessary. It would be so what's this movie about, James? It's about adversity. It's about humanity versus nature. It's about technology. It's about corporate greed being evil. It's about survival. It's about finding freedom. It's struggle against oppressive systems. There's always or very often, a strong female lead. I think in almost every movie there's a strong female lead. So I think that backs up your thesis there. It's very much for everybody in some way.
And yet, you also brought up the difficult thing that he must have, even with everything he's achieved, which is pitching to the people who are going to shell out the money.
Sure.
And he said, I read this quote from him a few months ago, that he was pitching when Avatar came out, making several sequels. And the studio, even though it was the biggest film of all time, that he'd beaten his own record with Titanic, said, I don't know about that. And he said he just looked at them and said, what part of making several billion more is difficult for you? He still had to convince them and persuade them to do it, because they're always going to be, in any pitch session in the industry, they're always just looking for a reason to say no, even with him. And so it is, but you said something about, man versus nature. Of course, that's the core theme in all of his stuff,
Yeah.
really. Man
Yeah.
versus man encountering nature. Sometimes nature is hostile, as in Aliens. Sometimes it seems to be hostile and turns out to be nice, as in The Abyss.
Hmm.
But he's got that core, and again, he's an explorer. I think that it's a passionately felt core. None of his films, I imagine, were ever easy to pitch, any of them.
I,
And so that he's a school of one.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. It really does stand alone. Look, we kind of briefly touched on cinema, habits, and kind of lamented the habits kind of withdrawing almost, particularly since COVID. I think cinema attendance. It's clearly kind of shifted. We've got streaming. We've got so much available home entertainment. Gaming is part of the mix as well. What does Avatar's draw say about audience behavior for you, particularly when you take into account the idea that it's such a premium experience visually?
I think that's it. It's a premium experience visually. He created a world. It's almost like an amusement park ride. And it's a world that you can only fully appreciate by seeing on the largest screen possible. Now, is that a recipe for a healthy industry to continue? That everybody does that? No. How much how much bigger can you make the screen and the world before the audience reaches a saturation point or before the industry just goes bankrupt?
Mm.
Again, it's, when I say he's a school of one, how many people could follow his lead? When he had the biggest film of all time with Titanic, how many other big epic historical romances about sinking ships can you make? There was no way that he could create a trend with that. And I don't think Avatar could be a trend either. Or and it can't, it isn't a trend. I mean, that's the interesting thing. It's been around now. The Avatar franchise has been around for 15 years or more.
Mm.
And it is not imitated because there's nothing there to imitate in a way. I mean, there's nothing that could be imitated, which is, I mean, for me, a positive thing, a mark of its originality and that it's doing something unique. It certainly is. But as an industry, a temporary industry savior, yes. But as a path that everyone else can follow, I don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, he's done it time after time, I suppose, from Terminator to T2 to, then complete change of direction with Titanic. Now we've got Avatar, 1, 2, 3. There's a fourth and a fifth. Apparently that's still in the works as well. The thing is, the production costs of these things are enormous. This kind of high-end visual stuff. How do you I mean, I'm asking you to kind of speculate, really, but studios, how do they approach balancing risk and reward here? Is Avatar a unique case because of the James Cameron factor, and the fact that it is so difficult to replicate?
Well, everybody was sure that Titanic was going to be a bomb.
Yeah.
If you read the history books, the Christmas season, Titanic was the big release, and the other big release was a Robin Williams movie called Bicentennial Man. And Hollywood was sure Bicentennial Man was going to be gigantic, and
Yeah.
Titanic was going to sink into, well, forgive that horrible pun. I wasn't even trying to go for it. Say Titanic was going to flop, and clearly that didn't happen since nobody knows what Bicentennial Man even is. So the now in talking about that, I sort of lost track of the question that you asked me, which was how do they bank on that they can justify this investment?
Exactly.
You can't because and that's what makes that business so scary. The rewards are great when it comes through, when Titanic comes through, when Avatar comes through. There's no guarantees with anybody, and that's why I remember watching an old Shark Tank episode years ago. Actually, it was only about 2 years ago, but somebody came in for a pitch, and you watch Shark Tank maybe once or twice at least,
I
and
have.
they're all looking at the guy, and he says, first of all, my pitch is it's a movie, and the three of the four said, I'm out because they know as an investment, a movie is just a horrible gamble. There's no way to predict where it's going to go. With James Cameron, anyone who bet on him paid off, but I'm sure there was a lot of sleepless nights before all those movies opened. Even now with this one,
I mean, I'm thinking of standout producers, directors, producers, however you want to term their capabilities, because they seem to be all things. But there are only a few. I'm thinking James Cameron. I'm thinking Steven Spielberg. Perhaps George Lucas is in there as well. Francis Ford
you're
Coppola.
talking about
It's
producing,
questionable. Well,
correct?
I'm talking about people who are involved in both fields because they seem to have tentacles that reach out. The really big names. I can't think of anybody as safe in terms of being a safe bet as James Cameron. So I'm kind of with you on that. It is it's almost impossible. It is impossible to predict. A question on the survival of cinema, once again. I'm interested in your thoughts on this. Do you think films like Avatar, the series, are now essential to financial survival of the cinema industry? In other words, can theatres sustain themselves without these kind of occasional mega, super, ultra event releases?
Well, I do think that cinema is going the way of legitimate theater, as we touched on before when we've talked. That Broadway and the West End still exist, but they don't have the cultural centrality and the thriving business. If you went to Broadway 100 years ago, there'd be theaters every 2 feet, all with shows
Yeah.
packed with people going to see them because there wasn't much competition, honestly. There was good shows being put on too, but it was just the movies were a very new form. There was no TV. There was no competition for theater. And then along came cinema, and then came television. Whenever there's competition, streaming is now the competition. It's in rough shape, and I don't know that it will ever reclaim that cultural centrality that it once did. I see that as unlikely. I think it'll be the thing that people do once in a while, and like they go to theater once in a while.
Mm.
And in the time when Broadway was thriving, you had serious plays like Death of a Salesman and lavish musicals like My Fair Lady. Nowadays, you've only got the lavish musicals. There's really no serious plays. It's very hard to get one of those up and running and keep it open. And I think an event movie like Avatar or like Marvel is the cinematic equivalent of a lavish musical for theater. So it probably, yes, you probably will see nothing but films like this in theaters going forward because people will want to enter the world of Avatar on the biggest screen possible, like going to an amusement park, as we said. And it's a shame because there's so many wonderful small movies that have been made over the past century. And I think if you ask people to name their 5 favorite films of all time, probably 4 of the 5 would be small movies, the sort that just can't be made anymore.
Mm.
If you think of great theater from the past, again, Death of a Salesman, Long Day's Journey at Night, things like that, they couldn't get produced in theater anymore. So it's just, I think event movies will be the way forward, but that doesn't mean a healthy industry or a healthy ecosystem.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I looked at some of the figures ahead of talking to you today, and I was looking in particular at James Cameron, who's just been announced as being announced. You don't get announced as being a billionaire, you become a billionaire, I suppose. But 28 years after making his first $2 billion box office hit, Titanic, that was 97. Doesn't seem like that long ago, but over the course of a 40-year career, his movies have collectively earned just under $9 billion, 8.7 if you want to be exact, at the worldwide box office. Until now, of course. So he's the second highest grossing director of all time behind Steven Spielberg. And of course, Cameron's achieved this milestone largely through the box office success of his films alone, really. Set the exploring side aside for a moment. But there is money to be made still in cinema, I think, is the point I'm trying to make, David.
Oh, there is money to be made, but also think about all the people you just mentioned. They've been around a long time. I
Sure.
mean, Spielberg, for instance, you could make the argument he had an amazing 7-year run from in the late 70s, from Jaws through E.T. into the early 80s,
Hmm.
and you could argue that he's been coasting on that run for a long time. He makes good movies. I mean, he had that incredible 1-2 punch in '93 with Jurassic Park and Schindler's List back to back. A great popcorn movie and a great adult movie.
Yeah.
But he's more of a craftsman, churning out product, and to a certain degree, coasting on former glories. He doesn't hit that mark that those films did back in that original run. Cameron has been going since the 80s. Also, Terminator was 84,
Yep.
over 40 years ago. Now everyone that he puts out is a bigger phenomenon than the one before in terms of gross. So he is still an ongoing active concern creating new things. Uh, and Lucas, of course, Lucas had a great idea with Star Wars. And you could argue that he's been coasting on that for a long time too. That one idea. Again, that sounds more negative than I mean it, but I'm just saying these people have been around a long time. Is there anybody who's come along like them? I don't think so. I don't think so. We're looking at these, for lack of a better term, old men who are the last of a breed,
I,
and I don't see the industry creating a field where people like that can come along either.
No, I'd say that's a reasonable assessment. Just a quick question. I want to, take a break in a second and then get to kind of part two and talk about James Cameron. And also, Michael's just made it to the studio. He's made his way through the floods and the rain. So we'll get a mini review of Avatar: Fire and Ash in a second, hopefully, and learn a little bit more about the movie. Final question for you. What should other studios and distributors learn from the Avatar release model when it comes to planning, distribution, pricing, marketing strategies?
Well, in terms of distribution and pricing, is it doing anything different from any other film that's coming out right now? I don't think so. I think it's just what the film is. They're going for as many IMAX screens as possible.
Mm.
And they know that the selling point of Avatar is not the story, it's the experience. And that's what they're selling. Whereas a movie like Sinners knew that the selling point was the story. And it was a unique story. Avatar is not a unique story, and I'm not saying that as a very negative thing, but they know that everything's riding. Sinners was a surprise that it did so well in theaters, but it was because for once the theatrical was offering something a little different. Um, Whereas Avatar, they know exactly what they're doing. Now, can other people follow it? I don't know. I saw an interesting interview with Sigourney Weaver when she was at the Red Sea Film Festival last week, and she was saying that people think that his approach with a bunch of actors in one little room and a lot of green screens or whatever screens they are around them, basically that it's very impersonal and inhuman. And she said, actually, it's so much more like theater, which for an actor, theater is the best thing, the best experience, working. It's not stopping and starting and redoing endlessly. But she said it's what Cameron has pioneered is something that's much more human, even though the popular perception is it's inhuman, because the actors just get to act with each other in a room a la theater, and they don't have to worry about the right sunset, the right weather patterns, all those mitigating factors that make the normal experience of filming so inhuman. So that's interesting. Maybe there is a way forward with the technology he's pioneered to make all sorts of films that create worlds. For instance, you can make an historical epic. For you think about a movie like Cleopatra in the early '60s, Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, and you
Mm,
watch that now, and you think they actually had to make Rome and Egypt and put all those people out there.
they did.
Now they could just have Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton in a room somewhere in Manhattan Beach, like they did for Avatar, and you let the technicians do the world building around them. But you could still release this film on as wide a screen as possible and get an audience in if you've got the right story and the right world.
Avatar: Fire and Ash is out now. We're talking to David Tully, head of media at Middlesex University here in Dubai. It's the morning drive on Mira Business FM. Leave us a like, hit subscribe wherever you're joining us from, and get in touch. We'd like to know exactly what you think as well. Remember, everything we do is available to listen or watch again, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts from. All you have to do is search Mira Business FM. It's very simple. You can contact us, info@mira.fm, and you can also get in touch over WhatsApp, whatsapp.mira.fm.